Today I rank every single FNAF installment in the 12 game lineup, including the recent Help Wanted 2 from worst to best. Before starting the video, this is just my personal opinion, and if yours is different, then leave it in the comments below and I'll check it out. But with that, let's get into the video. Starting off this list with my least favorite FNAF game is UCN. Compared to the other games in the series, UCN has never really been that game. I've kind of missed UCN when it released. I didn't really play it much, so already the game doesn't really mean as much as the other games in the series, but UCN has a few qualities that some other games don't in the series. For one, the gameplay is pretty good. There's a bunch of mechanics that, well, when the player learns, the game can be very much enjoyable. And furthermore, to add to this, the variety the game has. There's so many animatronics that at times it can be overwhelming. And this game is kind of a send-off to William Afton, or the purple guy. It's pretty much his purgatory, and that kind of makes the game feel coherent to the actual FNAF timeline. And I really like how Scott implemented story elements to a kind of one-off game, which is really awesome to see. Another thing that I really like about UCN is that there's a lot of secrets in this game. For one, the Freddy Bear jump scare. This one kind of felt out of nowhere, and when it was first discovered, it absolutely sent shockwaves around the FNAF community. Although I wasn't really present much in the community back then because I kind of just had a break on FNAF. I didn't really play much FNAF at the time, so hearing a Fredbear jump scare was kind of awesome. And there's also not just Fredbear, there's a bunch of other secret jump scares, and these can be spawned in by Dee Dee. She can spawn random animatronics, and sometimes you can get the likes of Nightmare Chica, you can get Plush Trap, you can even get Bonnet. There's a bunch of mystery to this game, and I really like that aspect to it. Just unfortunately, compared to the other games, I just don't really sit with UCN as much. I don't really see myself replaying this game compared to the other ones in the series. So yeah, UCN, it's my least favorite, but it's still a great game. Next is Security Breach. Now this one is a game that I fairly enjoy. And it's not because I find it scary, it's because I just really like the game and the scope it has. A whole pizzaplex to explore for the player does feel overwhelming, but in the best possible sense, because there's so much stuff to explore in this game. There's just a lot of little details that you may even miss on your first playthrough. It's just something that I don't really see much people talk about when it comes to Security Breach, and I do understand the game launched as a buggy mess, and even to this day, it's still a buggy mess, but I just can't find myself hating this game because the lore itself, not that good. I mean, Vanny is a wasted character. Glitch Trap or Burn Trap in this game doesn't really feel like he needs to be there. Like, was it really necessary to have Burn Trap in this game when you have a completely new character just being wasted and having probably around 5 minutes of screen time? I mean, that's just a waste of a character, to be honest. And with the build-up Help Wanted gave to Vanny, and for just the character to just not exist really in the game that was meant to be centered around that character, still feels like the narrative for this game wasn't really fully fleshed out, which definitely just made the quality of the final game just a lot worse. I really think that this game's narrative wasn't really thought of coherently. And well, what we got is now just kind of being retconned and being changed, and it all stems from the failure of Vanny's character. Security Breach doesn't really take itself seriously, and this is something that we do see with Steelwool games. They're not really taken seriously like the older games. They're very much just kind of poking jabs at just the humor of FNAF, and I find that really awesome. Like, this game had a bunch of memes, a bunch of community stuff that really made it feel a lot more just friendly for newcomers to join in the franchise and just enjoy this game for what it was. And I feel like that is something that Security Breach delivered on really well. And this also applies to Rune. I'm also going to include Rune in this ranking. Rune itself is pretty good. I mean, Steelwool kind of just had this out there to just kind of just show that they care for the fans, and I really do think Steelwool at their core really tried to make a game for the fans, and they definitely gave us something that was just a beautiful mess in my opinion. I really do think Security Breach and Rune, because Rune, it's a step up from Security Breach. You know, you have more scares, you have a more coherent plot. There's also just a narrative that just kind of goes forward. There's not really much exploration, but that's okay because Rune is not really meant to be this exploration game like Security Breach. It's a one-way narrative, and overall Rune is a lot better. It's a step up from Security Breach's main game, but overall Security Breach is a game that had potential. It didn't reach that height that it could have, but at the end of the day, it's a game that I do think just has a bunch of personality. So we're going to be putting this at the 9th spot. Next on the list is Sister Location. Now, on my original list, back when I made it like half a year ago or however long it was, I had Sister Location a lot higher on the list. But after replaying it a few times and just seeing the game for what it is, I honestly think this game is not as good as I once thought it was. The set pieces themselves feel really repetitive after just your first playthrough. I mean, the game itself has a bunch of potential when it comes to like the vent section where you're walking through the vent and you hear this ambience and you're just thinking, what is that? And then nothing happens. The game just kind of gives you this sense of immersion, but then that immersion is just there just to be there. It's just an ambient sound. I mean, you can have immersion, but just make it so there's actually something to be afraid of, not just something just in the background. And just the levels themselves, they're fine. I find myself enjoying like the Funtime Freddy section. It's an awesome section, one of my favorite in the whole franchise, the Funtime Foxy one. But if you just go ahead and replay this game, these sections become a lot less meaningful. The player kind of expects something, and that expectation kind of just hinders the horror this game has. And the first playthrough will always be your best playthrough. It would always have the most immersion. After that, it loses value, which in my opinion does give the game less replay value. And then characters like Circus Baby, who are just wasted. I mean, the game is focused on Circus Baby. The trailer showed Circus Baby being the main antagonist, and then the game comes out and then all of a sudden Circus Baby is just not there. She's not present, only in night 5, but that's kind of just for a repair level, and the jump scare isn't even Circus Baby, it's Enid, so this doesn't really add anything to the game. And my biggest gripe with this game is the lore. Sister Location completely just redefined the lore, and was it for the better? I mean, personally, I'm not a fan of the like newer lore. Obviously, I find it still intriguing enough to play the games, but I don't really find myself intrigued as much as I used to back when there was more mystery, and also the story just felt more grounded. Ever since Sister Location came out, the concept of FNAF has just dwindled into just ridiculous concepts, like for one, the like memory disc or the illusion disc that were meant to explain the events of FNAF 4. Like stuff like that doesn't really make sense to me, and all that can stem from this one game. Just this game completely changed the FNAF lore, and to this day we still see remnants of this very much apparent just incohesion of concepts. I mean, the first games were set, they were realistic, and then all of a sudden it just exploded into really weird concepts. But then again, Sister Location does a lot of things that the other games don't, and I really do think this game has the best atmosphere out of any FNAF game. I think FNAF 1 and this one have definitely the best atmospheres, but then again, there's a lot of stuff that this game nailed, and then a lot of stuff that this game just completely did wrong. But anyways, let's move on to the next spot on the list. Coming up next is Help Wanted, and just hear me out. This game was my original favorite FNAF game. On my first ranking video, I put Help Wanted as number 1, my favorite FNAF game. So how has it gone from number 1 to number 7? Let me explain, because I have just kind of had a recent like fascination with VRs. Ever since I went to my mate's house and he let me borrow his VR, I was completely just sold with the idea of just how cool these things are. Alright, so I had that first video around the same time when I first played FNAF VR, and I was blown away, okay? But after replaying it multiple times, and do be it, I played it on a Steam version, so of course that may not be the intended like version you're meant to play the game on, but that's how I'm gonna rank it. So I've replayed it around 2 to 3 times since that original VR playthrough, and I have to admit, this game isn't as good as I once thought it was. This game has FNAF 1 to 3, so does that mean the game already is better than those 3 games? I would say no. They really do feel like cookie cutter versions of the original games, just I don't find myself equally immersed in this game as I do with the actual games themselves they're based on, like FNAF 1 in the VR version. Just obviously you're in there in VR, so that means it has more immersion, right? But I just feel the gameplay for these VR versions or the Steam version just doesn't feel the same as the OG games. And then we have the other sections like the repair sections, and I'm gonna be honest, they're not that good. Definitely still will have gotten better at making these repair levels, but their first attempt at it, you can definitely see that they were just kind of making really stressful situations, but in reality, the actual repair levels themselves are not that complicated, they're not that hard, and I never really find myself getting jump scared in these sections. I mean, I didn't even know the hard mode Bonnie jump scare was a rainbow Bonnie or like a blue Bonnie. I didn't know this because I've never been jump scared after that first playthrough. I just find myself blitzing these sections. And then the plush baby level. I absolutely hate this level. I mean, you have to absolutely memorize every single baby and their spawn location, or if not, listen for their audio cues, which, mind you, they're very, very annoying to hear. I mean, the jump scare for the plush baby, it's just completely breaking your eardrums every single time it happens. I've heard of people having to just spend weeks on this one level just because they didn't have the time or the just have the motivation to complete a level that just feels so annoying to play, which is fair enough. I mean, this level is really always taking me over an hour to complete, so I can definitely see people just quitting the game after this level. And the lore, I mean, what much can I say that I already have said in my other videos? I just don't like this game's lore. The whole glitch trap scenario, why was William Afton in this game? Even if it's just a version of William, if it's not the actual William, why is there a William Afton Springtrap in this game? Who really wanted this? I mean, yes, it's cool. I mean, you can't really say that it's a bad thing, right? But is it a good thing? Absolutely not. And till this day, I don't actually 100% know how William got from a physical form to a digital form. I've heard theories about how he put his conscious onto a drive, or when they were like scanning the old equipment, the original agony of Springtrap was in it. It's just, I find the concept somewhat cool. I mean, the whole sci-fi stuff isn't terrible, but I mean, seriously, how did we get from animatronics moving around a pizzeria to possessed data drives with containing William Afton's soul? I mean, it's absurd, but then again, I don't think Help Wanted is a bad game. In fact, every game on this list, I love just a lot. You know, I don't find any game bad, but Help Wanted is one that I thought was good when I first played it, but after replaying it multiple times and getting absolutely everything I can in the game, I find myself not really just enjoying the game as I once thought I did. So yeah, let's go to the next game. This next one is gonna be met with a lot of confusion. A lot of people are gonna absolutely throw pitchforks at me, but on the next spot on the list, so we're pretty much getting halfway here, it's gonna be FNAF 2. I understand why people love this game, okay? It pretty much is the most OG FNAF game you can get. This game pretty much started what FNAF is today. The first game was just a little sneak peek, you know, a little bit of this is what we could get, and this game was just, this is it. This is FNAF, and it pretty much does everything okay. I mean, the gameplay, is it a step up from FNAF 1? I would say yes. I think the mask mechanic is not terrible, okay? Contrary to what people say that the mask is bad, I think it's okay. I mean, you have to just kind of think that the mask is a get out of jail free card. It works every time, and as long as the player is quick enough to react to any animatronic, you are pretty much good to go. You cannot die. You have Foxy, who acts as just kind of the light animatronic, you need to flash Foxy with your light or he will jump scare you. And then you have the music box, and both of these things requires you not in the mask. So as long as you go in the mask, you can't die, but you also need to remember your music box can fail or just unwind and then you're dead, or Foxy might just get pissed off and you're dead. So you need to really be able to manage both of these things and also at the same time manage animatronics in your vent. Then we have other aspects like the lore, and this game has pretty good lore. I mean, you have the purple guy, and this is pretty much the mystery of FNAF. This game started that mystery. FNAF 1 had the posters on the walls, but this game had 8-bit levels. These levels created so much confusion, but at the same time created the FNAF story we know today. And for that, I commend this game, because for 10 years or 9 years or however long it's been, to this day, we're still getting movies centered around this core story, which is insane. Also, the amount of Easter eggs this game has. I mean, from the first game, we pretty much had the It's Me posters around the whole pizzeria. We also had Golden Freddy, but in this game, we have the inclusion of Shadow Freddy, well, I'm not going to even describe what this thing is, but let's call it Shadow Toy Bonnie. And you also have just the amount of other, very obscure stuff like the girl version of Balloon Boy underneath the desk, or the amount of weird poses the animatronics now do, like the iconic Chica pose when she's at the Paper Pal area. There's just so much stuff this game does right, but to call this game the best or one of the best in the series, I think is completely wrong. As much as I commend the gameplay, at times the game can just feel very much unrewarding to the player. I mean, to constantly be able to fend off animatronics as if they're not even there completely gets rid of any sense of fear that this game may have once had. I mean, apart from the occasional Foxy, or if you even want to stretch it, the Mangle jump scare, there's not really much sense of dread or sense of when will the jump scare happen. You know when the jump scare is happening. If that mask doesn't go on, you're dead. You know that. And for that reason, the jump scares themselves are not really that good after the first time it happens. Also, the immersion that the first game built, this game doesn't really deliver that same sense of kind of atmosphere. I mean, the sounds the animatronics make just feel so industrial. I know this is what Scott was intending, but the first game just had this really eerie feel that this game doesn't really contain. And the first game definitely had better atmosphere, but that doesn't mean this game is a bad game. In fact, any of the games I mentioned in this list, it was very hard to rank. I really struggled to rank these games, but I looked at this game objectively, and there's definitely a lot of faults. I mean, overall, there's a bunch of good things, but then there's a bunch of bad things, and I tried ranking FNAF 2 as best as I could, and this is where I'm gonna put FNAF 2. So let's move on before I just go on like a 10-minute tangent about why FNAF 2 is just not bad but not good. Next on the list, so number 5, this is going to be FNAF 3. This game has bumped up the list a little bit from my last ranking. Why is this? Well, I've played this multiple times since I've last made a ranking video, and I have to admit FNAF 3 has grown on me. A lot of people criticize this game for having a bad jump scare and having repetitive and boring gameplay, and one of those is true. The jump scare is not good, okay? There's nothing I can say about this jump scare. It's just really poor. And you can say William is seeing Mike for the first time, so perhaps maybe his eyes open up to seeing his son for the first time in 30 years. Well, this isn't really a good enough excuse for the fact that it's just a poor jump scare, because from this point, I doubt Scott had the idea of Mike being the protagonist in FNAF 3 at this point. I would actually say the phantom animatronic jump scares are pretty much the decent jump scares in this game. Springtrap, obviously, for being the big bad, for being the only actual jump scare that occurs in the game, because when Springtrap jump scares you, you die. So to have that jump scare be really underwhelming, it kind of makes the other phantom jump scares not really impact the player as much. But beside that, the other aspects of FNAF 3 are very well done. The world building and the atmosphere, I feel, is the best part of FNAF 3. There's just so much world building in the first night, and although there isn't an animatronic threat, obviously Springtrap comes on night 2, there's still a lot of world building that the player gets to immerse in. Obviously, we see Phone Dude, and Phone Dude isn't really acquainted with the situation he's been put in with managing or being a part of the FNAF 3 establishment. There's so much history that we get to see, and we know this because we were in the other two pizzerias. We know how much bad things occurred in these places, the missing kids incidents, and just overall there's so much lore to pick up just by the atmosphere alone. And when Springtrap gets implemented into the game in Night 2, all of a sudden there's so much more depth that Springtrap actually just stalks the player the whole night, and the way he moves is something that I think no animatronic comes close to even matching Springtrap's just uneasiness. There's so many camera poses I never knew Springtrap could actually do. If I looked at a video on FNAF 3 and it showed all the Springtrap poses, and half of them I've never ever seen. Obviously because the game makes it so Springtrap is hard to spot. That's the whole point of having Springtrap in the game. He makes it hard for the player, definitely more so than any animatronic in the whole series. The music and the overall soundtrack this game has, the night opening sound, this is iconic. It's one of the most used night opening sounds in the whole franchise. You hop on any FNAF custom game or any FNAF fan game and you will most likely hear this exact same sound. It's one of the most iconic ones and definitely goes to show how much of a complete package this game is. You really have everything you want in a good FNAF game. And by far the best aspect of FNAF 3 is the lore. This game's lore is to this day still being spoken about, still being shown in the terms of the FNAF movies. The whole William Afton Springlock just moment is by far the most popular FNAF moment ever. This is literally the most FNAF thing you can ever get. Although the idea is a little bit kind of wacky, it's just so FNAF that a human turns into an animatronic. That is just something that you don't really see anywhere. It's just something only FNAF can do, and by far FNAF 3 has pretty much everything you can ask for, even the secrets in this game. This game has by far the most secrets out of any FNAF game. The secret or the good ending requires the player to beat 5 or I think it's 6 secret challenges throughout the nights. The Balloon Boy sections, even the Chica section in the Chica Pizza World I believe it's called, and also the Mangle area. You even get a glimpse of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, and then you have Shadow Bonnie as well. I don't think even Scott knew where he was going with this kind of secret lore games, and I think that is what makes it so much more enjoyable, because it probably just doesn't mean anything, but still people will still theorize what it could mean, and I think that's something that really holds true to why FNAF 3 is an absolute masterclass in just being an amazing FNAF game. Moving on to the 4th spot, this is Help Wanted 2. By far, Steelwool's best game, period. What the first game didn't do, this game did to an absolute T. Now, there isn't much scares in this game. There's some scares that are really good, but by far, this game has to be the least scariest game in the series. But it has a bunch of personality, such that I don't think has ever been seen in FNAF to this date. The animatronics feel so immersive. The game makes it more confrontational with the animatronics. Chica is, well, as Chica as you can get. Roxy is, well, as Roxy as anything can get. There's just so much personality and so much passion put into this game. And the overall Pizzaplex levels, although they're not my favorite levels ever, I'm gonna say the food levels are not my favorite. I would even say the Fizzy Faz levels are pretty not that good. I appreciate Stillwell tried making a classic FNAF experience in the Pizzaplex, but was this really the way to do it? The gameplay loop is a bit boring, but I mean, it's something, and I think that when you're in the just atmosphere of the game and how the VR is done really well. I mean, this has to be one of the best VR games I've ever played, and I haven't played much VR games, but this one has just such immersion that I don't think any FNAF game can even come close to the immersion Help Wanted 2 creates. Even the sister location levels, I regard these as absolute bangers. They've pretty much made sister location a lot more enjoyable, and I always thought Sister Location was meant to be a VR game, and to see how far Stillwell have come in kind of their game design philosophy from having just a really bad start with Security Breach, but then releasing a really polished off game, makes me really happy. Also, characters like Lefty and Scrap Baby, I think it is. Yep, Scrap Baby. Their character designs in Help Wanted 2 are absolutely terrifying. I mean, Lefty has never looked as terrifying as it does in Help Wanted 2. I mean, look at that thing. That thing is just nightmare fuel. Some downsides of Help Wanted 2 is the lore. I talked about already how the lore after Help Wanted, or pretty much after Sister Location, just went down a really bad rabbit hole, and this game is kind of just really just gives a lot of loose ends. There's not really much clarity. I would say the best we get is the Glitch Trap and Vanny cutscene, where Vanny just pretty much squishes Glitch Trap. I guess that kind of shows how Glitch Trap, the virus of Glitch Trap, dies in this game, but at least now it's confirmed that Glitch Trap is dead, so I guess that kind of works, but then again, it's not really that good. Something I would say is good lore is the Bonnie Mask implementation. This creates a lot of loose ends, but good ones, because people are theorizing that this is actually the bully from FNAF 4, or one of the bullies with the Bonnie Mask, and people are saying that this is Cassie's dad. I mean, that itself sounds really interesting, but I'm not going to go too much into other like theories, because the theories doesn't really make the game what it is, but definitely gives it more personality, I would say. I'm trying not to be too recently biased, but the game is really well done, and it's one of the best FNAF games we've gotten in recent years. So for that, I'm going to be putting it in this spot. Alright, next is FNAF 1, the original FNAF game, the game that started absolutely everything. Without this game, we wouldn't have FNAF, and that alone makes it already a game that really means a lot to a lot of people. But something that FNAF 1 does extremely well, and by far is the master of atmosphere. This game's atmosphere is by far the best in the series. The noises you can hear throughout the pizzeria feel so real. It actually feels you are in a pizzeria filled with possessed animatronics. I can't really explain it much, it's just got such depth, and I think Scott really nailed home the idea of uneasiness in this game. And I think something that FNAF 1 does extremely well is the animatronic designs. I mean, these animatronic designs are by far the most popular designs in the whole series. Even 9 years later, these animatronics, the original ones we got in this game, are by far the most popular. I mean, the FNAF movie just showed just how popular the original animatronics are. I mean, this game is what created FNAF, so I mean, the animatronics had to have been good to have actually sparked such interest for the franchise. And also, this game is just revolutionary. I mean, at the time in 2014, there wasn't really much indie popular horror games, and all of a sudden FNAF just came out of nowhere and everyone was talking about the game. I mean, that is really impressive. So the game must have been good for people to have just absolutely been blown away by the game, and the game is very good. Everything coming down to the replayability, the atmosphere, the world building, and the lore that was kind of sprinkled in this game. It was kind of a glimpse of what the lore would eventually come to, and without this game, FNAF just wouldn't be what it is today. But the gameplay of FNAF 1 is flat. Okay, let's get into more of the downsides of FNAF 1. The things that I would say are pretty not that good. And for one, the gameplay. I mean, you get the camera system, which was iconic at the time, the monitoring horror game that became so popular, and this game started it, but you have to keep in mind that this game had a very boring gameplay loop. I mean, you have 2 doors left to right. If you see the animatronic at your door, you close it. That's pretty much it. And the cameras pretty much become useless unless you're looking for Foxy and Freddy, which then you can say there's more variety, but eventually it was found that if you keep your camera on Freddy, Foxy will be permanently stuck in the cove, because as long as the camera is activated, doesn't matter what camera it is, Foxy will be affected by it. So it pretty much makes it so you're looking at both doors, checking one camera, repeat, and this pretty much can get you through the game without worrying about any animatronic. And this is more of a strat or kind of a cheese that was found, but it's in the original game. If you play the game now, you can perform this same strat, and for that reason, the gameplay just really doesn't feel that good. It's pretty boring because you have a strat that can always work. And this was later just used for FNAF 2. FNAF 2 literally has a strat that can always work, but FNAF 1 incidentally has this exact same thing, which makes it a lot less replayable. But the atmosphere and the world building is just so good that I physically could not rank this lower than number 3. I mean, it's an OG. It's one of the best FNAF games, and I'm gonna put it in the number 3 spot. So, our next game on the list, the top 2 and number 2, is gonna be Pizzeria Simulator. There is one word that can describe this game, and that is underrated. Pizzeria Simulator is by far the most underappreciated FNAF game I've ever seen. This is literally a perfect FNAF game. Now I know the opening section can be a little bit misleading, alright? The whole pizzeria section of the game where you have to just kind of build the pizzeria, I love that section, but I know a lot of people say that, well, how can it be a good FNAF game? I mean, you're just kind of playing these silly arcade games. How can this be fun? Well, that's not where Pizzeria Sim shines. The true absolute magnum opus of Pizzeria Simulator is the night sections. The after hours where you are pretty much stuck in a very much decrepit office ventilation system and you have to fend off the animatronics using audio lures, using absolutely anything you can get your hands on, and it really makes for a terrifying gameplay experience. If you've played Pizzeria Sim, you know exactly how terrifying this office space is. The sounds the animatronics make in the vents is something that truly makes me terrified each time I hear. Every time you hear an animatronic in the vent, it always makes you unnerved. And especially when they get close and they creep up and then you have to take action and actually look toward that appropriate vent, it really makes for a very tough experience, but one that really rewards either good strategizing or just really good RNG. There's also the factor that you need to also keep an eye on your task. These are what you have to do to complete your night, and until these tasks are complete, your night can last anywhere between 6 minutes to 30 minutes. So there's no guarantee that you will survive the night purely of just survival. You need to take action, and that whole idea of you making that really risky decision, knowing that if you complete this task, you may get out quicker, but at the same time, more audio will be played across the ventilation system, attracting unwanted animatronics, and they will come toward you quicker because of the audio. This is what makes Pizzeria Sim truly a terrifying masterpiece. And the lore in Pizzeria Sim is top tier. I mean, this is what FNAF finished on. This was the last mainline FNAF game. It concluded a very convoluted story in a matter that people were happy with. Like, people will always say that Henry speech or the ending of Pizzeria Sim is by far the best cutscene in FNAF history. It wrapped up a really interesting story and did so that actually felt like there was closure to some characters. And well, today, obviously the FNAF lore just continued and well, just kept on growing. But at the time, this was it. This was the last FNAF game we would ever see. It actually grounded the story where Sister Location was trying to innovate and create new ideas. FNAF 6 pretty much took everything back to basics. It just made a more simplified story for the player to get along with. It actually made sure that players would be able to understand what was being shown, because a lot of the cutscene or the more secret levels like the Midnight Murderer section or the security puppet level, these sections actually had a story. It was coherent. It showed things happening in a manner that players can actually understand. And unlike Help Wanted 2 or the other games that have newly released, it gives closure to things that at times can just feel too convoluted, because we need more simplified stories in FNAF. It gives people a lot more immersion, but I do understand that FNAF is trying to cater toward theorists, and I love that it's doing that. But then again, sometimes a good, well-told story will always beat a more convoluted just mess. And I think Pizzeria Sim is a perfect example of when FNAF can tell stories right. It's amazing. This game also has a ton of character, with everything to do with Helpy during the arcade games or just the overall friendliness of the pizzeria. I really think this game is not only an underrated game, but is one of the best FNAF games we have ever seen to this date. So let's move on to the last game. My favorite FNAF game, and what I believe could be the best game we will ever receive in the FNAF universe. This is, of course, the one and only FNAF 4. I can't tell you how much this game as a kid terrified me. I know a lot of yous got terrified with this game, and me included. I really could not stand this game because it was just terrifying. The designs of the animatronics were awesome. I mean, if you look at all the animatronics in the whole series, there is always something just so nightmarish about the nightmare animatronics. They're just done perfectly, and you always get a sense of fear going up to that door and listening for the audio, because one mistake, or even if you mishear the audio, you're gonna get jump scared. And when I tell you this game has the best jump scares in the series, I mean FNAF 4 has the best jump scares I've ever seen, ever. These things are terrifying. The sound mixed with the way the animatronic jumps at you is just so good. And I don't think FNAF has ever come close to recapturing this jump scare essence. It is just so good. And I think this also comes down to the designs of the animatronics being just terrifying, but this game has to be the most scary game in the whole series. The gameplay as well is not too complicated, but at the same time, it's very simple. It's just got a nice balance between complicated and easy that really makes it feel like a very balanced game. You've got Freddy, you've got Bonnie and Chica on the hallways, and then you have Foxy coming at you in your closet. I mean, it's very simple, but to manage every single animatronic and to do so at a very efficient rate can be very challenging to the player, especially on the max difficulty in this game, which is obviously 2020. This is a very hard challenge. And then you have the other animatronics like Fredbear and Nightmare, who kind of give you everything. These are the animatronics that have every single mechanic but turned into one animatronic, and it is a definite task to complete these nights. I mean, night 5 with Fredbear, it's hard, but then you get to night 8 with Nightmare and it is just a completely different game. I mean, these animatronics will get you if you're not paying attention. And also, look at these animatronic designs. Look at Nightmare and Fredbear. These things are just the definition of fear. I mean, they look like real life bears mixed into a nightmarish animatronic body. And it definitely gives you something to fear. And I can even say the same for Night Marionette, or even Nightmare Mangle, and even Nightmare Balloon Boy. I can tell you right now, Nightmare Balloon Boy, for me, for some reason, I just hated it. I absolutely always remember just being terrified by this one animatronic, and it really goes to show Scott just wanted to scare people with this game. He went back to his roots, just wanting to scare people, and did so absolutely flawlessly. This game was just terrifying to play. The lore, I mean, FNAF 4's lore is pretty well regarded as the best in the whole series. But there's one issue, and it's the dream theory. This is what I believe Scott was intending for this game. It was very obvious with the box that there was something going on here. You know, this wasn't something that was giving off the vibe that this is a grounded story. There was a definite incentive of a dream theory present in this game. But if you just remove this one little bad thing, this one little cataclysmic error that was made in this game, the story is very good. The main character, the crying child, by far the most important character in the whole FNAF franchise, beside William Afton. We finally get to see what truly happened at one of the first pizzerias at Freddy's, the bite incident. This wasn't the bite of 87, but it was a different bite, the bite of 83, one that occurred years before the original bite. I mean, this is iconic, right? The whole Markiplier meme came from this scene, and by far, the bite of 83, or the bite of 83 was by far the most important event in the whole FNAF franchise. It showed the backstory of FNAF. And this is the only game that showed the prior events to FNAF 1. Not really many games take place before this time. In fact, none take place before the year 1987, I believe. Every game is after that. So this was the only backstory game we ever got. And it is a very good way to show that there's a bunch of story to tell even before the original games. And I hope that Stillwell in the future can maybe tell these stories in the form of a very much older FNAF game, maybe taking place in the 70s or the 80s. And the whole circus theory could actually be a really awesome story with maybe Fredbear and Spring Bonnie as antagonists. But I'm getting off topic. This is a ranking video. You also have the plush trap levels, which don't really add too much, but they're pretty decent. They give you an opportunity to advance 2 hours in the next night that you play, which I think is very cool to have in the game. It gives the player a kind of reward system if they do beat this night, so that's pretty awesome. But overall, I'm gonna have to put FNAF 4 as the #1 FNAF game just because it is just a complete game. It has everything right. It does everything to a T, and I would say confidently, FNAF 4 is my favorite FNAF game. Well, here is the final list with all the games put on it, starting from the best at the S tier and the worst at the C tier. But all these games I love in their own way, and none of these games I would say are bad games. There's just some that I prefer than to others, which is why I made this video in the first place. If you have made it this far into the video, I thank you so much for staying with me for 40 minutes talking about FNAF games. This video is just kind of my overall opinion on the FNAF games. I hope it's been enjoyable to watch. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have enjoyed this video, smash a like, and if you are new around here and enjoy this content, subscribe as well. And with that, until next time, take it easy and goodbye.